I'm with George Safar, and we're here in Beit Sahour, which is very close to Bethlehem. George, what is Beit Sahour famous for?
Well, hello, Paul. How are you doing? It's nice to have me again with you. I'm so glad that we're meeting again, but this time at the Shepherd's Fields, which is something really difficult because a difficult place, a different setting. And when we're talking about the Shepherd's Fields, it's something to do or related with the Christmas event. Now, before we start, I'd like to wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hopefully that the 2022 would be much better than 2021 and the whole world will have peace that the angels proclaimed to the shepherds 2,000 years ago. Now, the Shepherd's Fields. First, I'd like to speak about the location. Now, the naming. Why we call this the Shepherd's Fields? Was it originally called the Shepherd's Fields or not? Now, for the Arabs, this is Beit Sahour. Now, for many, they would require to even ask what Beit Sahour stands for. What does it mean? Or what the word Beit Sahour derived from. Now, Beit Sahour is almost the same as we say Beit Lahem. But Beit Lahem is the house or the place of the bread. But here's Beit Sahour is the house or the place of the night watchers. Now, when we say Beit is house. This is literally translated in Arabic as a house, but Sahour is the man or the person who stays awake the whole night. Now, eventually we come to the conclusion that this is the place where the shepherds used to watch their sheep in the open fields. Now, does it have other names? Of course. In the past, now we're talking about Genesis, this was known as Migdal Eder. Now, what is Migdal Eder? Migdal Eder is the Tower of the Flocks. The Tower of the Flocks. Now, if you look around you, Paul, you see the urban area, it's expanding over the expanse of the land. So it doesn't seem to me that this is the place where the shepherds used to herd their animals in the open fields. Now, this is mountainous area. It doesn't seem like flat area. This is mountainous, rocky area. But if you look down there, you would see that there are flat areas. This might intend to give us a clue what happened at that time. So, Migdal Eder is related to what Rachel's story is related with. So you might be asking, what is the story? The story told us in Genesis that the first mention of Bethlehem, Ephrata, or Bethlehem Migdal Eder, followed the story of Rachel's death in the northern extension of Bethlehem. Now, we're talking about the death of our matriarch Rachel, the wife of Jacob. Now, the story says that she was in labor. She couldn't stand giving birth of her second child, Benjamin. She died. Now, after or following her death, Jacob, her husband, moved to the east. This is the east. This is where we're standing now. North, west, this is the east. He moved to the east and he pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. Migdal Eder is the Tower of the Flocks. Literally gives us a clue that here, shepherds or animals used to be heard by the shepherds. Now, Watchtower, of course, it's part of this huge complex of the Franciscans who own this whole area. Now, was this the original area? That's what we're going to speak about in the later questions if you have.
Are there sheep in the shepherd's fields today?
Well, when I say used to, because this is my almost second year of not having any groups, hopefully this would change so soon, especially during the springtime, we used to see and watch sheep herding in the fields. Where are the fields? Down there. Now, especially in springtime, of course, they would have their sheep kept for the winter time and would have them herding in the fields during the summertime. Now, the springtime would be filled, these fields would be filled with sheep. So they still having it. And there are many shepherds that I used to meet and down in the fields. And they told me a lot of beautiful stories about having the sheep heard in the field, especially, Paul, when their sheep had their legs broken. And you know what? This reminds me of the beautiful story of the manger. Believe me, Paul, because when I used to hear those stories that after their sheep having, go astray in the fields, having their legs broken, they would take them, then wrap their legs with the swaddling clothes and used to place them in what is called a box, like a hay box, for them to heal. Then they would have them back for their mothers to herd with. So this is one of the beautiful stories that they used to hear from them. And if you wish to see more of these nomad shepherds, on the way to Jericho, you can find them still living in those humble tent-shaped tent places that they used or is still living in as the people did for a long time ago.
Were these special sheep that were bred on the shepherd fields?
You know, when we're talking about the sheep will always, from even at the time of Abraham, we hear the stories of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac, that they were one of the shepherds that they used to herd the sheep in the open fields. Now, they were so special. Of course, it came to be special after God commanded that the unblemished, unhurt, untouched, unwounded sheep would be presented for the temple. Now you might be asking, now where's the place? Would be in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mountainous area. This is the perfect area because the surroundings, and according to the Midrash, which is the commentaries of the Jewish people, the Jewish writings, this would be the place where the Messiah, the expected lamb to be coming out of. So shepherds, sheep, and lambs, of course. Now, God in the Old Testament have ordered that in order to remission or to redeem people from their sins, of course, they have to offer a lamb for the temple, and the temple is seen as God's presence among his people. Yeah, this is the place. This is the place where the shepherds in the Old Testament used to raise their animals, especially the lamb animals, the unhurt, the untouched, the unwounded, in order to be offered for the temple, which reminds us of the sentence or even the verse that we should contemplate about when John the Baptist especially pointed out that Jesus, following his baptism in the Jordan River, told his disciples, here's the Lamb of God that you should follow. And they were wondering, of course, well, we're following you. No, said, I'm decreasing, and this man should be increasing. So from that moment, they followed Jesus Christ. And that's what all the people and all the followers and even those who believe in Jesus should do from now.
Is there a special place in Beit Sahour where the shepherds are remembered?
Well, the three denominations, I'm speaking of three denominations. We're talking about the Greek Orthodox, Franciscans, and the Protestants. They have three different places. And, each they have their own places that they believe that would be the Shepherd's Feast location or the site or the setting that Luke, the Gospel of Luke, spoke about. Now, I've been to those three places, and to tell you the truth, it's mountainous. The area is mountainous, and it should be a flattened area, like the Greek Orthodox place, which I believe that the writings of the first century people, especially the historians, told us about, especially Eusebius, the church historian, that the people at that time, they used to visit a place that Queen Elena, mothers of Constantine, built almost on that area. Now, how can we exclude or reach a conclusive that was the most authentic? Of course, the description, the people they had, and Saint Jerome also wrote about that church exactly, that there's a church is built over that cave that the shepherds used to, tend the sheep from. And today it's possessed by the Greek Orthodox. I visited that place already, and the Greek Orthodox community believe that there 3 tombs, which belongs to the 3 shepherds. I wonder where they came that number from. Buried in that place, frescoes, mosaics, beautiful discoveries that they had at that place. And of course, there's a newly built church next to it. Now, second or alternative church is the Franciscan church, or the Church of the Shepherds and the Pastors. The Church of the Shepherds and the Angels and the Shepherds. This church that we will be visiting is built during the 60s of the last century. It's believed that this is the location, since it's built over or on top of a cave. They believe that that would be the place where the shepherds used to tend the sheep from. So, 60s, Antonio Barlucci, one of the most renowned architects of his time. The Franciscan monks had him built that church on top of the cave, and since then it's been venerated by the whole world. Now, every year, of course, we come here on the 24th, and thousands of tourist groups flock into this place to enjoy the Christmas carols and singing, dancing, having liturgical masses, held all over the places. Now, the third would be for the Protestants. Now, I've been to that place, Paul, already, and I've seen many caves and grottos that dust the area. They said that they found, during excavations of the 60s of the last century, they found items and pieces that dates back from the early days. days, especially the Roman and the early days of Jesus' time. Now, who's right, who's wrong? That depends on the man's conclusion and the view that they would have at the places that they would be visiting. Now, if you ask me which is the most authentic, I would tell you the Bible is the authentic. The Bible tells us that here's the shepherd's field and that is Bethlehem. Now, if you look around you, Paul, this place is full of houses today. It doesn't seem to us that there are like open fields anymore, but Bethlehem, which is seen at the top of that hill, gives us a clue that it should be here somewhere where it all happened.
Now, there are caves all around here. What would the caves have been used in Jesus' time?
The caves, of course, for the people at that time, they would be used as a cave house. Now, what does that mean? If you go, especially on the southeastern side of Bethlehem, at what is known today as the Bedouins or the Ta'amra, those Ta'amras village, they have the many houses, but those houses are built exactly next to those caves. Now, what those caves are used today? Now, before we speak about that, in the Old Testament's time, they used to herd their animals in there. Now, how does it look like? It looks like that there was like a receiving room where they used to receive their guests. Of course, they're like a sleeping room, but behind or just on top of that sleeping room would be the place where the animals would be kept. What does that mean? What do you mean on top? Of course, when I say on top, imagine that this house has 2 floors. The ground floor would be for the animals. The ground floor would be for the animals. The top floor would be for the family to sleep. And on the top would they have the upper room where they would receive their guests. Okay? Now that room, at the time of Jesus, was filled of people. So they wouldn't have the place for them to stay. So they went into the stable area, the lower, not the sleeping rooms, but into this stable area where the animals used to be kept. Now, how does it seem today? If we go to visit that cave that we will be visiting in some moments, Paul, you would see it like a flat area. Now, was it the same at the time of Jesus? I would answer yes. Yes, because such a huge place to keep your animals and your family at the same time to protect. Now, the question is why they used to have their animals inside their homes? For a couple of reasons. To protect them from wild animals, but at the same time, for the winter time, to have them in there. The breeze that comes out from them would have the house warm at that time. Now, of course, people doesn't live in, in caves anymore, but for today and nowadays, they use them as storage areas, or some families would have it enclosed or shut down, or even the shutdown, to have them filled with water, because water is so important for this area that Bethlehem's region doesn't receive too much rain. It's almost 500 millimeters. It doesn't fit for the big families, because nowadays each family, they have 8 members, or sometimes it's 10 members, so they need to collect water. So these caves, most of the families at their homes have it enclosed, shut down, in order to have water stored for the summertime use.
Did the shepherds guard the entrance of the cave, becoming the door?
Well, yes. Now we read in the Bible that Jesus Christ is the door. I was reading the book a couple of days ago, and I was really wondered, what does it mean? Jesus said about himself that I'm the door, but at the same time I'm the shepherd. So usually the doorkeeper or the gatekeeper was one person, and the shepherd is another person, and the family members would be another group members of the family. But Jesus Christ said about himself that I'm the gatekeeper, I'm the door, and I'm the shepherd at the same time, which means that I'm the long-awaited person that the Jewish community have been waiting for. Now, of course, the mouth, this is what we call fam or tom lemgara. The gate, or the mouth of the gate, is shut down with a normal gate. So in order to keep the inners, protected from, the looters or the thieves or anything that would hurt their families.
Would there be more than one flock of sheep in there at a time? Different people bringing their flocks?
Well, we have to consider the size, the area or the size of the cave. And if you ask me how many people, how many sheep would be held by, inside that cave, and I would say like only maybe 2 sheep or 1 cow or 1 donkey at the same time. Now you ask me why you said 2 sheep. That depends on the family members. That depends on the family members. And remember, the sheep would be offered for the temple, and the Jewish community and the rules, or even the law of the Jewish in the Old Testaments demanded that the Jewish family would be offering 2 sheep in one day when they go to visit the temple, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening time. So I would say 2. And that also depends on how many they would be having at that time, because, the family would have the sheep raised for multiple reasons, for the food, for the milk, for the wool. But the most important, the most significant part of all I mentioned already is to offer them for the temple.
Would the shepherd out in the field have more sheep, though, in the fields?
Yes, this is what I said. This brings us to the story of the shepherds, Paul. Now, the shepherds, they were abiding in the fields, keeping the night watch over the flocks. Now, why the Bible said in the fields and not in the cave? All the time people go to visit that cave, and they just don't realize that the Bible said that they were in the fields, keeping the night watch. Does it mean that the sheep were in the fields? No, actually not. As we said in the beginning, there were a lot or many or multiple caves that's the area. So when we said they were abiding in the fields, keeping the night watch, it means that one of the caves were kept or were exclusively used for the sheep, and the shepherds would be standing where? At the gate, at the door, watching them over from the wild animals. So we have to be careful to distinguish, Paul, between the house or the cave house and the herding, or let me say the sheep house. The sheep house is something belongs to the fields, which is different than the house that the people used to live and sleep within. Yeah.
Is Beit Sahour a strong Christian town today?
Now, Beit Sahour, of course, it is a Christian town. Actually, there are almost 14,000 people. You can say that's 80% of the population are Christians and 20% are Muslims. Now, we have to take into consideration the turbulent times of the 40s of the last century that put too much pressure on the population that many people choose to immigrate. Now, where we can find them then? Of course, United States and most of the European countries. And now, if you ask me how's the situation today, peaceful, tolerance, you can find love, friendship, neighborhoods, and filled with Christians and Muslims living together. And I can say that Beit Sahour is one of the good examples of what happened during the 80s of the last century, when they were the first and even the last towns and even Christian towns who rejected the Israelis' demands for them to pay taxes for the government. Beit Sahour is also an industrial area, not like the other Palestinian towns, especially in Hebron, where they have like too much complexes for them. So Beit Sahour, they have a plastic factory, and of course they have the macaronis factory, but the most important, most significant productions of Beit Sahour is the olive wood carvings. Now, if you ask me where it comes from, if you look around you would see that the area is filled with olive trees, and olive trees is the main pieces, the main tree that the people use to cut off during the pruning season and have those pieces reshaped into beautiful figures for the tourists to buy, to bring back to their homes what they had, purchased as a memory of their visit to the Holy Land. Of course, besides olive wood, they had the mother pearl. And the mother pearl is such beautiful pieces brought from the Mediterranean shores and reshaped in a way that even the presidents of the United States became amazed with. Wow. Why I'm saying that? Because Mahmoud Abbas, during the peaceful time with the United States governments, he used to bring them those pieces made by the Beit Sahour craftsmen, and they were so amazed by the workmanship of the people of Bethlehem region. Wow. Yeah.
What's your prayer for the future for Beit Sahour?
Well, my prayers, I wish them all the best. I wish the whole world that would come out from this pandemic that changed the face of the world, the modern world. And the people of Beit Sahour deserves much, much than people expected, because they have their doors open. They're most hospitable people, peaceful, lovable. And I wish them all the best, and I would like also to thank them of having us today in Beit Sahour. Especially, they have their doors open to visit this most beautiful place that we call the Shepherd's Fields.
Okay, George, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.